That said, Valorant. We are here to talk about Valorant today.
Valorant.
And Valorant was a game for me that was very contentious when it released back in... when? It released a few years ago. I'm gonna be honest, I should have looked this up, but alas. But it was at the time when people were becoming more dissatisfied with Overwatch and were looking for a new place to go. And so, as a hardcore Overwatch player during that time, it was a very contentious release.
Yeah, it was, and to see so many people go to Valorant and then just especially Overwatch players, go to Valorant and then just kind of trash on this game that you love, and they used to love. And I get it, they were, bored with it, tired of it, whatever you want to say with it. But at any rate, here nor there, different rant.
And so when I first gave it a go, I did not give it near the fair shake it deserved. When Overwatch 2 was on the horizon, we were both kind of sitting in the waiting room, and we decided to branch out. And Valorant was one of those games we decided to branch out to. So we got into Valorant because we were just killing time, really, while waiting for Overwatch 2. We had nothing better to do. Overwatch 1 was winding down. Everyone could feel it.
And it didn't feel good to play at all. It was still fun, but it just didn't feel good. Because everybody was just kind of waiting for the release of Overwatch 2. And so hitting Valorant was something new and fresh. Hitting Apex was something new and fresh. For me, I went back to Fortnite.
So that's a little of the why we got into Apex. Or not Apex.
Well, both. Valorant.
Yeah.
The topic of the day, Valorant.
Oh, yeah, that's a little why we got into Valorant. On the topic of Valorant, the characters. And I don't think any of the characters are bad. They're not poorly designed.
No, I feel they're designed pretty well for as far as characters go. And
I think a big problem I have with the characters in Valorant, though, is Valorant's characters feel soulless.
Yeah, there's really nothing there. They're just shells of something. There's no, for lack of a better term, there's no character there. There's no heart. They're just there. They're just purpose,
And I think that's fine for a game like Valorant. But coming from Overwatch, where all of the characters, like them or not, are superb in personality, design, it just makes the characters in Valorant feel hollow.
Yeah.
And makes me want more from them.
I feel more like with Overwatch, there's a lot of backstories to the characters. I'd really like to see more, and I'm sure Valorant has backstories to some of the characters, if not all of them. I don't feel vested in the characters.
I think that's the more important point, is I don't feel vested in these characters enough to go find out what their backstories are.
Right.
None of the characters are so interesting that I want to know more about them, compared to some of the Overwatch characters. I find the idea of a giant space gorilla interesting, and I want to know how we got from point A to point B with Winston. But I don't feel that for characters like Sage or Jet. They're just kind of there.
But to be honest, from my point, I don't know the overall story of what Valorant is. Is there a story? Is there, Overwatch has a history, they were an organization for good and, then got wronged or whatever, there's that whole backstory of what Overwatch is. And my ignorance of Valorant, I don't know if there is or if there isn't. So
I do believe there is a fairly decent history of the Valorant world, and that does a lot of good world building. It's just not apparent. in the same way that Overwatch's was. In Overwatch 1, you got that opening cinematic with Winston,
Right.
where you didn't learn a lot, but you learned enough. You learned enough about the Overwatch world to become inherently interested in.
Yeah, you wanted to know more. What's really going on here? This is,
And when you boot up Valorant for the first time, you get no such thing.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of feeling of that. And it's not to say, there's anything wrong with that. It's just I don't get that personal. It doesn't grab me like Overwatch grabs me. With I play every time I boot up Overwatch, I think of something about one of the cinematics I've watched or just the lore of Overwatch and whatnot. I don't get that with Valorant. Maybe that's my fault for not seeking out the backstory of Valorant and maybe some of the characters. And maybe I'll look into that so, maybe there'll be a little more interest there on the characters. Maybe it'll give them a little more soul and a little more character and heart,
But on a first impression, coming from Overwatch, the characters were incredibly soulless. That said, for a game like Valorant that is designed as an esport first, and a competitive game first, it is something that I don't really mind.
No, I don't mind it at all.
It doesn't affect my view of the game at large.
No, definitely not.
But that said, it's not doing it any favors. Everything about Valorant's aesthetic design doesn't scream anything out to me. It screams purpose.
Right.
Like, all of it was purpose built for the gameplay.
Yeah.
Like, all of the banter between rounds doesn't feel good. It doesn't sound good. It sounds like it was there because Overwatch had it, or because Apex has that kind of stuff.
Or they felt they needed to have, just filler. Yeah, you're right. It's there
out of obligation
because everybody else is doing it, but it feels like that. Whether it is or that's the case or not, it definitely feels that way. It feels like, oh, well, we need to do this because that's what everybody else is doing. And it almost feels unfinished. And I'm not knocking designers or developers or any of that. It doesn't feel fluid. It feels forced. It doesn't feel, like the banter in Overwatch and the spawn rooms, You kind of look forward to it, to the voice lines between characters and each different character. And in Valorant, it's just, I do feel like it's there for filler and I don't really pay attention a whole lot. And maybe that's my bad.
Yes, perhaps that is something that we are missing as just kind of observers of Valorant more than like dedicated players. Perhaps people could level that same complaint against Overwatch.
Oh, for sure. We're biased against Overwatch, so it's one of those things where, yes, I'm sure a Valorant player could say the exact same type of thing because they're vested in Valorant, and I'm okay with that. I'm literally fine with that. I get it. But this is also just my perspective of Valorant.
Absolutely.
So.